The explosion threw Jake Morrison against the metal wall so hard his teeth rattled. Emergency lights bathed everything in red as the exploration ship Aurora's Edge spun out of control. Jake grabbed the nearest support beam and held on tight as gravity shifted wildly around him. Hull breach in Section 4. Someone screamed over the alarms, "We're going down." Jake pushed himself toward the emergency equipment lockers. His marine training kicked in even as the ship shook apart around him. He grabbed his survival pack and thermal gear, knowing they would need every piece of equipment. If they survived the crash, the ship hit the planet's surface with a sound like thunder. Metal twisted and groaned. Jake felt himself thrown forward. Then everything went black. He woke up face down in the snow. His head pounded and blood ran down his face from a cut above his eye. The silence felt strange after all the noise. Jake pushed himself up and looked around. Pieces of the Aurora's Edge lay scattered across the frozen landscape like broken toys. The cold hit him immediately, even through his uniform and jacket. The wind cut through him like knives. Jake checked his watch. Temperature read -40 degrees and dropping fast. It may be an hour before frostbite set in. Jake pulled his survival pack closer and took inventory. Emergency shelter tent, thermal blankets, water purification tablets, 3 days of food rations, and a basic medical kit. Not much, but it would have to do. He stood up slowly and scanned the crash site. The main section of the ship lay about 200 yards away, black smoke rising from its broken hull. Jake started walking toward it, hoping to find other survivors. The snow crunched under his boots with each step. His breath came out in white clouds that froze before they could drift away. Jake had trained in cold weather survival, but this planet was colder than anything Earth could offer. He reached the main wreckage and began searching through the debris. Most of the compartments were crushed or filled with twisted metal. Jake called out but heard no response. He was starting to think he was the only survivor when he heard a weak coughing sound. Following the noise, Jake found Dr. Lisa Carter trapped under a piece of hull plating. She was conscious but barely moving. Blood stained the snow around her. "Left leg? Hey doc, you still with me?" Jake knelt beside her and checked for other injuries. Lisa tried to speak but only managed to whisper. "Jake, is that you?" "Yeah, it's me. Just stay still while I get you out of here." Jake examined the mantelpiece, pinning her down. It was heavy, but he could move it if he was careful. "I can't feel my leg," Lisa said, her voice getting weaker. Jake put his hands under the metal and lifted slowly. Lisa cried out in pain, but managed to pull her leg free. Jake could see the bone wasn't broken, but she had a deep cut that was bleeding badly. "We need to stop this bleeding and get you warm," Jake said. He opened his medical kit and pulled out gauze and medical tape. Working quickly, he wrapped Lisa's leg tight enough to slow the bleeding, but not cut off circulation. Lisa's lips were already turning blue from the cold. Jake helped her sit up and wrapped one of his thermal blankets around her shoulders. "How bad is it out there?" she asked. Jake looked around at the scattered wreckage. "Bad. I haven't found anyone else yet. The ship's main power is dead and we're losing heat fast." As if to prove his point, a gust of wind blew snow across them.
Ow.
The temperature was dropping even more as the planet's twin suns moved lower in the sky. "I can't walk on this leg," Lisa said. "You should go look for the others. I'll just slow you down." Jake shook his head. "Not happening, Doc. We stick together." He helped Lisa to her feet and let her lean against him. They moved slowly away from the wreckage toward a cluster of large rocks that might provide some shelter from the wind. There, Jake pointed to a gap between two boulders. "We can set up the emergency tent there." It took them 20 minutes to cover what should have been a 5-minute walk. By the time they reached the rocks, both were shivering uncontrollably. Jake's fingers were so numb, he could barely work the tent's assembly system. The emergency shelter was designed for one person, but would have to hold both of them. Jake got it set up in the narrow space between the rocks just as the wind picked up again. Snow began falling harder, and the temperature dropped another 10 degrees. "Get inside," Jake told Lisa. "I'll gather what supplies I can from the wreck." "Don't go back out there." Lisa grabbed his arm. "It's getting too cold. You won't make it back." Jake looked at the falling snow and realized she was right. The blizzard was getting worse by the minute. Soon, visibility would drop to 0, and the cold would become deadly. He helped Lisa into the small tent and crawled in after her. The space was so tight, they had to sit pressed against each other. Jake activated the tent's small heating unit, but it would only keep them alive, not comfortable. "This isn't exactly how I planned to spend my shore leave," Lisa said with a weak smile. Jake pulled both thermal blankets over them. "At least we're alive. It's more than I expected after that." Crash! Outside the tent, the wind howled like a living thing. Jake could hear debris from the ship being blown across the frozen ground. The temperature kept dropping, and soon even the tent's heater couldn't keep up with the cold. "Jake," Lisa whispered. "I'm so cold, I can't stop shaking." Jake looked at her pale face and knew they were in serious trouble. The heating unit was designed for one person, not two. At this rate, they would both freeze to death before morning. He made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "We need to share body heat," Jake said. "It's the only way we're going to survive this." Lisa nodded weakly. Jake wrapped his arms around her and pulled her close. Their combined body heat under the blankets began to warm the small space. For the first time since the crash, Jake thought they might actually make it through the night. Neither of them knew that in the shadows beyond the wreckage, alien eyes were watching their every move. Jake woke to the sound of wind still howling outside the tent. His body ached from sleeping on the hard ground, but he was warm. Lisa was curled against his chest, her breathing steady and even. The small heating unit hummed quietly in the corner. Working harder than it was designed to? He checked his watch. They had been in the tent for 8 hours. Outside, the blizzard still raged with no sign of stopping. Jake carefully moved his arm to reach his water bottle without waking Lisa. Water was nearly frozen despite being inside the heated tent. Lisa stirred and opened her eyes. "How long was I asleep?" "About 8 hours. "How's the leg feeling?" She shifted slightly and winced. "Stiff and sore, but the bleeding stopped. Your bandages did the job." Jake sat up as much as the low tent ceiling allowed. "We need to talk about our situation. Storm shows no signs of letting up, and our heating unit won't last more than another day at this rate." Lisa pushed herself up on her elbows. "What about food and water? I have 3 days of rations for one person. We can stretch it to maybe 5 days for 2 if we're careful. Water is actually easier since we can melt snow, but we need fuel too." "Do it. So we have maybe 2 days before we need to find better shelter or more supplies," Lisa said. Jake nodded. "That's assuming the storm stops and we can move around. With your leg injury, traveling will be slow." Lisa was quiet for a moment, thinking, "Jake, I'm a xenobiologist. I know this planet was surveyed before we arrived. There might be native life forms we can use for food or shelter materials." "What kind of life forms?" "The initial survey mentioned some kind of plant life that grows in the ice formations. If I remember correctly, they called it crystalline lichen. It might be edible." Jake looked skeptical. "Might be? What if it's poisonous? We have basic testing equipment in the medical kit. I can run simple toxicity tests. It's better than starving." A sudden gust of wind shook the tent violently. Both of them instinctively moved closer together as the fabric. Walls bent inward. "First priority is keeping this tent from collapsing," Jake said. "Then we worry about food." He spent the next hour reinforcing the tent's anchor points with pieces of metal debris he had brought from the crash site. Lisa helped as much as she could from inside, holding support poles steady while Jake worked. By the time he finished, both of them were hungry. Jake divided one food ration into 2 small portions. The processed protein bars tasted like cardboard, but they provided necessary calories. "Tell me about this lichen," Jake said as they ate. Lisa pulled out her datapad, which still had some battery life left. "According to the survey, it grows in clusters on the ice formations. It gets energy from the planet's magnetic field somehow. The survey team noted it, but didn't test it for human consumption." "Where would we find these ice formations?" "There should be some about half a mile from the crash site. Natural rock formations where the ice builds up in layers." Jake looked at the tent walls, which were still shaking from the wind. "We're not going anywhere in this storm, but when it clears, we'll check it out." The second day passed slowly. The storm continued without pause, and their heating unit's power indicator dropped steadily. They took turns sleeping to conserve body heat, always staying close together. Under the thermal blankets, Lisa used the time to go through her scientific equipment, checking what had survived the crash. Her portable analyzer was damaged, but still functional. Her sample collection kit was intact. "I can test small samples of anything we find," she told Jake. "Basic chemical analysis, toxicity screening. It's not perfect, but it's better than guessing." Jake spent his time planning their survival strategy. He drew maps in his notebook, marking where they had seen debris scattered and noting potential shelter locations. "If we can't find rescue soon, we need to think about long-term survival," he said. "The tent won't last forever, and neither will our supplies." "How long before they send a rescue mission?" Lisa asked. Jake was quiet for a long moment. "The Aurora's Edge was on a mapping mission. We weren't due to report back for 3 weeks. It could be a month before anyone realizes we're missing." Lisa absorbed this information. "Then we definitely need to find local food sources." On the third morning, Jake woke to silence. The wind had finally stopped. He carefully unzipped the tent's entrance and looked outside. The storm had ended, leaving everything covered in a thick layer of fresh snow. "The storm's over," he told Lisa. "Time to go hunting for your lichen." They prepared carefully for the expedition. Jake helped Lisa stand and test her injured leg. She could walk with support, but slowly. "You sure you can make it half a mile?" Jake asked. "I have to. We both know what happens if we don't find food soon." Jake packed the medical kit and sample collection equipment in his backpack. He helped Lisa out of the tent, and they began walking toward the ice formations. The journey took over an hour. Lisa had to stop frequently to rest her leg, and the deep snow made walking difficult. But finally, they reached a cluster of tall rock spires covered in thick, crystalline ice. There, Lisa pointed 2 patches of blue-green growth covering the ice. "That's the lichen." Jake helped her get close enough to collect samples. The lichen grew in flat, circular patches that looked almost like frozen seaweed. Lisa carefully scraped small amounts into her sample containers. "It doesn't smell like anything," she noted. "That's usually a good sign." They collected samples from several different patches, then began the slow journey back to their tent. Lisa's portable analyzer would need several hours to complete the basic tests as they walked. Jake noticed something that made him stop. "Lisa, look at that ridge over there." Following his gaze, Lisa saw what looked like structures built into the distant hillside. Not natural rock formations, but something that looked almost like buildings. "Those aren't on any of the survey maps," Lisa said quietly. Jake stared at the distant structures. "No, they're not, which means this planet isn't as empty as we thought." Neither of them noticed the figures watching from those very structures. Figures who had been observing their every move since the crash. The watchers had seen Jake and Lisa share warmth in their tent, had witnessed their cooperation and mutual care. In their ancient culture, such behaviors had only one meaning. The humans had chosen each other as mates, according to the old laws. Now the watchers faced a decision that would affect both species forever. Jake woke to the sound of footsteps crunching in the snow outside their tent. He froze, listening carefully. The steps were deliberate and slow, circling their shelter. Lisa was still asleep against his shoulder, but he could feel her breathing change as she began to wake. "Lisa," he whispered quietly. "Don't move. We have company." Her eyes opened instantly. Years of field research had taught her to wake up alert. She listened to the sounds outside and nodded silently. Jake slowly reached for his sidearm. Moving carefully to avoid making noise, the footsteps stopped directly outside the tent's entrance. Both humans held their breath. A voice spoke from outside. The words were completely foreign, but the tone sounded like a question. Jake and Lisa looked at each other, unsure how to respond. The voice spoke again, louder this time. Then they heard more footsteps. At least 3 or 4 individuals were now surrounding their tent. "We need to respond somehow," Lisa whispered. "If they wanted to hurt us, they probably would have done it already." Jake nodded slowly, cleared his throat, and spoke toward the tent entrance. "Hello? We are humans. We crashed here. We come in peace. Silence followed his words, and the voices returned, speaking rapidly among themselves in their alien language. Jake caught what sounded like argument or discussion. Finally, one voice spoke directly to them again. This time, Jake could make out what might have been an attempt at human words, though heavily accented and broken. You ... come ... out. We ... see ... you. Nate looked at Lisa. She nodded, indicating she was ready. Jake unzipped the tent entrance, slowly, and crawled out first, keeping his hands visible and empty. 3 alien beings stood in the snow around their tent. They were tall, maybe 7 feet, with reptilian features and thick scaled skin that looked almost like natural armor. Their eyes were large and golden, and they wore what appeared to be clothing made from some kind of woven material. The largest of the 3 stepped forward. It carried what was obviously a weapon, though Jake couldn't tell exactly how it worked. The alien spoke again in its broken human words. You ... together ... in. Cold shelter, you ... heat. Jake was surprised they knew anything about human language, but he answered carefully. Yes, we shared warmth to survive. The cold would have killed us. The aliens spoke among themselves again. Jake noticed their body language seemed agitated or excited. Finally, the leader turned back to them. You ... eat. Bond, you. Mates now. Ancient law. Jake felt confusion wash over him. I'm sorry, I don't understand. Mates Lisa crawled out of the tent to stand beside Jake. The aliens immediately focused on her, their golden eyes studying her carefully. When she stood close to Jake for support because of her injured leg, the aliens made sounds that might have been approval. An older alien appeared from behind the rocks. This one moved differently, with more authority. The others stepped back respectfully as it approached. The older alien studied Jake and Lisa for a long moment before speaking. I am Zixa. I speak your words better. You are the crashed sky beings, yes? Lisa answered. I'm Dr. Lisa Carter, and this is Sergeant Jake Morrison. Our ship crashed during the storm. Zixai nodded slowly. We watched you fall from the sky. We watched you help each other. We watched you share the cold shelter and give heat to each other. We had to, Jake explained. Without sharing body heat, we would have died from the cold. Yes, Zixai said. This is how heat bonding works. In the cold time, 2 beings choose to share warmth and life. This makes them mates according to the ancient law. Lisa stepped forward carefully. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Jake and I aren't mates. We're just colleagues who survived a crash together. The aliens spoke rapidly among themselves again. Zixai looked troubled as she turned back to them. This is ... difficult. You performed the heat bonding ritual. You shared shelter in the cold time. You gave your warmth to each other to preserve life. By our law, you are now bonded mates. Jake tried to explain. In human culture, that's just survival. I don't have the same bonding rituals you do. Zixai was quiet for a long moment, clearly thinking. Finally, she spoke to the other aliens in their language. The discussion that followed sounded intense, with several aliens speaking at once. There is problem, Zixai finally said. R. Warrior Veltar says you cannot be unbonded once the ritual is complete. To break a heat bond is great dishonor. It means exile or death. Lisa felt Jake tense beside her. We didn't know about your customs. We were just trying to survive. Intent does not matter, Zixai replied. Action matters. You chose each other. In the cold time, you are bonded. Veltar, the large alien who had spoken first, stepped forward again. He spoke rapidly to Zixai, pointing at Jake and Lisa. His tone sounded aggressive. Veltar says bonded pairs must be treated as citizens of our clan. But he does not trust sky beings. Thinks you may be lying about the bonding to gain protection. Jake realized they were walking a dangerous line. These aliens had customs they didn't understand, and breaking those customs could get them killed. We respect your laws, Jake said carefully. We don't want to cause problems for your people, Lisa added. We're grateful that you found us. Without help, we would have died in the cold. Sci-fi studied them both again. You will come with us too. The settlement. The clan leaders must decide what to do with bonded sky beings. If you are truly heat bonded, you will be protected and cared for. If you are lying. She didn't finish the sentence. Veltar and the other aliens began gathering Jake and Lisa's supplies from the tent. They worked efficiently, clearly familiar. With the equipment somehow. How do you know about human things? Lisa asked. We've watched sky beings before, Sci-fi replied. Not all who come here survive the cold. You learn from what they leave behind. Jake helped Lisa walk as they followed the aliens away from their campsite. She leaned heavily on his arm, and he noticed the aliens watching their interaction closely. Studying everything we do, Lisa whispered to Jake. I know. Need to be careful. One wrong move and they might decide we're not really bonded. As they walked toward the alien settlement, Jake realized their survival now depended on convincing these beings that he and Lisa were something they had never intended to become. Their lives might depend on pretending to be mates in a culture they didn't understand. The Cathani settlement surprised Jake and Lisa with its size and complexity. What had looked like simple structures from a distance were actually entrances to a vast underground city carved into the rock. Warm air flowed up from the tunnels, carrying strange but pleasant smells. Sci-fi led them down a wide ramp that spiraled into the earth. The walls glowed with a soft blue light that seemed to come from the rock itself. Jake noticed the temperature rose steadily as they descended. People live underground? Lisa asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming her caution. The surface is too cold for most of the year, Sci-fi explained. We have lived in the deep places for thousands of seasons. The earth keeps us warm. They passed other Cathani in the tunnels. All of them stopped to stare at the two humans. Jake heard whispered conversations in their alien language and caught repeated use of what might have been the same word. What are they saying? He asked. They speak of the heat-bonded sky beings, Sci-fi replied. Word travels fast in the tunnels. Everyone knows of your arrival. The tunnel opened into a huge cavern lit by more of the glowing rock formations. Buildings were carved directly into the cavern walls, connected by bridges and walkways. Hundreds of Cathani moved through the spaces below. This is incredible, Lisa whispered. The engineering alone must have taken generations. Sci-fi looked pleased by Lisa's interest. We are builders and shapers of stone. It is our gift. They were led to a dwelling carved into the cavern wall, accessed by a narrow bridge. Inside, Jake was surprised to find the space was warm and comfortable. Furniture was built into the rock walls, and soft fabrics covered the surfaces. This will be your dwelling while you remain with us, Sci-fi said. It is appropriate for a bonded pair. Jake noticed there was only one sleeping area, a wide platform covered with thick bedding. The implications were clear. Thank you, Lisa said quickly before Jake could object. We're grateful for your hospitality. After Sci-fi left, Jake and Lisa sat on the edge of the sleeping platform and spoke in low voices. This is getting complicated, Jake said. They expect us to act like we're actually married. I know, but what choice do we have? If we tell them the truth, they might exile us, or worse. A sound at the entrance made them look up. Young Cathani entered carrying a tray of food. Behind her came Veltar, the warrior who had found them. The young female placed the tray on a low table and spoke to them in heavily accented human words. I am Kethra.
I bring food for bonded ones.
The food was unlike anything Jake had seen before. There were vegetables that looked almost like earth plants, but with different colors, and what appeared to be some kind of meat cooked in a spicy sauce. Veltar watched them carefully as they ate. Finally, he spoke to Lisa directly. You female? Why do you not carry the mark of bonding? Lisa looked confused. Mark? What mark? Veltar pointed to his own neck, where Jake could see a pattern of raised scales forming an intricate design. Bonded females receive the mark from their mates. Where is yours? Jake felt his stomach drop. Another cultural requirement they knew nothing about. Our bonding is still new, Lisa said carefully. The mark comes later in human tradition. Veltar's golden eyes narrowed. You speak lies. All bonded pairs share the mark immediately. It is the proof of commitment. Cathra looked between them nervously and spoke quickly to Veltar in their language. He responded harshly, clearly angry. What's happening? Jake asked. Veltar doubts your bonding, Cathra explained. He says true bonded pairs cannot hide their connection. He wants to test you. Test us how? Lisa asked. Veltar spoke directly to Jake, his tone challenging. Bonded males protect their mates above all else. If I threaten your female, will you fight to defend her? Jake stood up immediately, moving between Veltar and Lisa. Yes, I'll protect her with my life. Veltar seemed satisfied by Jake's quick response, but he continued the test. And you, female? If your mate was injured, would you tend his wounds before your own? Of course, Lisa answered without hesitation.
Ow.
Jake risked his life to save me at the crash site. I would do the same for him. The two Cathani spoke together in their language. Finally, Veltar nodded slowly. Perhaps the bonding is real, he said, but there are other tests. 3 more humans were brought into the dwelling under guard. Jake's heart jumped when he recognized Captain Roy Anderson, pilot Amy Foster, and Communications Officer Steve Miller from the Aurora's Edge. Jake. Lisa, Captain Anderson called out. Thank God you're alive. We thought you were dead. Captain, how did you survive the crash? Jake asked. We found shelter in part of the ship's hull. It took us 3 days to dig out after the storm ended. These aliens found us this morning. Amy Foster looked around the dwelling with amazement. This place is incredible. How long have you two been here? Just arrived today, Lisa said. Jake, maybe we should explain the situation to them. But before Jake could speak, Veltar stepped forward and addressed Captain Anderson in broken human. Words? You are a leader of sky beings? And the captain of the crashed ship? Yes, these two. Veltar pointed at Jake and Lisa. Claimed to be heat bonded. Mates. You confirm this? Captain Anderson looked confused. Mates. Jake and Lisa. Oh, they're not married. They're just crew members. The effect was immediate. Veltar's expression darkened, and he spoke rapidly to Kethra. What did I say wrong? Captain Anderson asked. Lisa's face went pale. Captain, you don't understand. These people think Jake and I are married because we shared a shelter to survive. It's their cultural law. But you're not married, Amy Foster said. Everyone knows you two are just friends. Veltar turned to face Jake and Lisa, his stance threatening. You spoke lies. You are not bonded. You used our sacred ritual to gain protection. Wait, Jake said desperately. Let me explain. But Veltar was already speaking to the other Kethani in their language. The word he used repeatedly sounded angry and final. Zixai appeared at the entrance, pushing through the gathering crowd. She spoke urgently with Veltar, then turned to the humans. This is very bad, she said. Veltar says you have dishonored the heat bonding ritual. He demands punishment for the insult to our ways. What kind of punishment, Captain Anderson? Asked Exile to the surface. Zixai replied. In the cold season, it means death. Lisa grabbed Jake's arm. We need to make them understand we weren't trying to deceive anyone. But the crowd of Kethani outside was growing larger and more agitated. Jake realized their survival had just become much more complicated. Other humans had arrived just in time to destroy the illusion that might have kept him and Lisa alive. The crowd of angry Kethani pressed closer to the dwelling entrance. Veltara spoke harshly to his warriors, pointing at Jake and Lisa. Several aliens moved their hands toward weapons that hung from their belts. Zixai raised her arms and spoke loudly in the Kethani language. The crowd fell silent, but Jake could see the tension in their golden eyes. The elder turned to address all the humans. I have asked for time to speak with the clan leaders before any punishment is decided, but Veltar is very angry. He believes you have made a mockery of our most sacred tradition. Captain Anderson stepped forward. I think I caused this problem. Can you explain exactly what I said wrong? The heat bonding ritual is not about human marriage, Zixai said patiently. It is about choosing to share life and death in the cold time. When two beings risk everything to keep each other alive, they become bonded in our eyes. Lisa spoke up. Jake did risk everything to save me, and I would have done the same for him. Isn't that what matters? Yes, Sci-fi nodded. But Veltar says if it was real bonding, you would have known what it meant. You would have accepted it willingly, not denied it when your friends arrived. Jake looked at Lisa, then at his fellow survivors. What if we're willing to accept it now? What if we choose to honor your bonding ritual? Amy Foster stared at him. Jake, what are you saying? I'm saying maybe what happened between Lisa and me was more than just survival. Maybe we really did bond in that tent, and we just didn't understand what it meant. Veltar spoke angrily to Zixi. She listened, then shook her head. Veltar says it is too late. Cannot choose bonding after you have already rejected it. The ritual only works when the choice is made in the moment of greatest need. The situation seemed hopeless. Jake could see no way to convince the aliens that he and Lisa deserved protection. Then Lisa stepped forward. Sci-fi, may I ask you something about your people? The elder nodded. You said you were builders and shapers of stone. That's impressive. But how do you get energy for your tools? How do you create light without fire? Zixi looked surprised by the question. We use the living rock. Stores energy from the planet's core and releases it slowly. Could you show me? I'm a scientist. I study how different forms of life work. Your technology could help both our peoples. Veltar spoke sharply, but Zixi held up her hand to silence him. She studied Lisa carefully. Why do you ask this? Because Jake and I want to contribute something to your people. We don't want to just take your protection and give nothing back. If we can share knowledge between our species, maybe that's worth something. Zixi was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke to the crowd in their language. The discussion that followed was intense, with many voices speaking at once. Finally, she turned back to the humans. Some of our people are curious about sky being knowledge, but others say it is dangerous to trust those who have already broken our laws. Captain Anderson stepped forward again. If it helps, I can confirm that Jake and Lisa really did save each other's lives. They worked together perfectly during the survival situation. Maybe they are bonded in ways that matter, even if they didn't know your customs. Steve Miller nodded. I saw them at the crash site. Jake carried Lisa to safety when she was injured. She helped him figure out how to survive the cold. They protected each other, Amy Foster added, and they've been inseparable since the crash. Even now, they're standing together facing this problem as a team. Jake realized she was right. Without thinking about it, he and Lisa had moved to stand side by side, facing the crowd together. Lisa was close enough that he could feel her breathing, and he had instinctively positioned himself to shield her if trouble started. Zixi noticed their positioning too. You move as bonded pairs move. You protect each other without thinking. Perhaps the bonding is real, even if you did not understand it. Veltar made a disgusted sound and spoke rapidly to Zixi. She listened, then nodded slowly. Veltar offers a compromise. If the sky beings can prove their value to our people, he will accept that the bonding may be real. But they must demonstrate knowledge that helps our clan survive. What kind of knowledge? Lisa asked. Our food sources are limited during the cold seasons. Our young ones sometimes do not survive the deep winter. If you can help us solve these problems, Veltar will accept your presence. Lisa looked at Jake, then back at Zixi. I can help with food sources. I found edible plants near our crash site. With proper testing, we might be able to cultivate them in your underground spaces. I can help with defense and organization, Jake added. Military knowledge about protecting settlements and managing resources during difficult times. Zixi translated their offers to the crowd. The angry murmuring began to change tone. Some of the Cathani sounded interested rather than hostile. A signal device began beeping from Captain Anderson's equipment pack. All the humans turned toward the sound. That's an emergency beacon, Amy Foster said excitedly. Someone's trying to contact us. Captain Anderson quickly pulled out his communication device. Static filled the air. Then a faint human voice came through. This is Rescue Ship Meridian calling any Aurora's Edge survivors. Please respond. The humans erupted in celebration, but Jake noticed the Cathani were watching their reactions carefully. He quickly moved closer to Lisa. Lisa, they're watching us. How we react to rescue will determine if they believe our bonding is real. Lisa understood immediately. Instead of celebrating with the others, she stayed close to Jake. What do we tell them? About the rescue, I mean. Jake looked at the communication device, then at Zixai. We tell them the truth, that we want to help both our peoples, and that means some of us need to stay here while others go to make contact with our ships. Captain Anderson was already speaking into the device. Meridian, this is Captain Anderson. We have 6 survivors, but we're in a complex situation with indigenous life forms. We need diplomatic contact, not just extraction. The voice from the rescue ship sounded confused. Captain, are you under threat? Do you need immediate military assistance? Jake stepped forward and took the communication device. Meridian, this is Sergeant Morrison. We're safe, but we've made first contact with an intelligent species. We need time to establish proper diplomatic relations before any rescue operations. Lisa moved beside him and spoke into the device. This is Dr. Carter. We've discovered an advanced civilization with technology that could benefit both species. Request permission to begin formal contact protocols. The Kethany watched this exchange with great interest. Zixai spoke quietly to Veltar, who nodded slowly. You choose to stay with us rather than leave immediately, Zixai observed. This shows commitment to the bonding and to our people. Veltar stepped forward and spoke directly to Jake and Lisa. Perhaps the heat bonding was real. Perhaps sky beings can learn our ways and teach us theirs. We will allow you to prove yourselves. Jake felt relief wash over him, but he also realized something else. Looking at Lisa standing beside him, facing this challenge together, he wondered if the Kethany might have been right about their bonding all along. 6 months later, Jake stood on the observation platform of the newly built research station, watching the twin suns of Keth 7 set over the thermal cities below. The station was a marvel of combined human and Kethany engineering built into the mountainside above the main settlement. Lisa appeared beside him, carrying 2 cups of the hot drink that Kethany had taught them to make from processed ice lichen. She handed one to Jake and stood close enough that their shoulders touched. Latest crop yield reports came in, she said. The modified lichen is producing 40% more nutrition than the wild varieties. The Kethany won't have to worry about food shortages during the deep winter anymore. Jake smiled and sipped the warm drink. It had taken weeks to get used to the taste, but now he actually enjoyed it. And Veltar's security improvements are working well too. The new early warning systems detected that ice storm 3 days before it hit. Below them, lights began appearing in the Kethany city as the night shift took over from the day workers. Human and Kethany figures moved together through the tunnels, working side by side on projects that would have been impossible for either species alone.
Captain Anderson contacted us from the Meridian today,
Lisa said. The first diplomatic mission from Earth will arrive next month. They want to establish a permanent embassy here. Good, the Kethany are ready for it. Zixai has been preparing her people for months. Lisa was quiet for a moment, then asked, Do you ever regret staying here? Amy and Steve seemed happy to go back to Earth. Jake considered the question seriously. When the rescue ship had finally been able to land safely, 3 of the 6 survivors had chosen to return with it. Captain Anderson had stayed for 2 months to help establish initial diplomatic protocols, but he had also chosen to go back to file official reports. Only Jake and Lisa had remained permanently. No, Jake said finally. This feels right. We're building something important here. The Kethany certainly think so. Sai told me today that our partnership has changed how her people think about other species. They're not as afraid of outsiders anymore. Jake turned to look at Lisa. Her face was lit by the warm glow from the city below, and he could see the contentment in her expression. The past 6 months had changed both of them. Lisa had thrown herself into learning everything about Kethany biotechnology, while Jake had worked with Veltar to improve the security and organization of the combined settlements. But more than that, they had grown closer in ways that went beyond their professional partnership. Lisa, Jake said carefully, I need to tell you something. She turned to face him fully. What is it? When we first got here, I thought the Kethany were wrong about us being bonded. I thought it was just a cultural misunderstanding that we had to play along with to survive. And now? Jake looked into her eyes. Now I think maybe they understood something about us that we didn't understand about ourselves. These past months, working together, building this place. I can't imagine doing it with anyone else." Lisa smiled softly. "Jake, are you trying to tell me you love me?" He laughed, feeling suddenly nervous despite everything they had been through together. "Yeah, I guess I am. Is that okay?" "It's more than okay. I've been feeling the same way for months, but I wasn't sure if you were just being protective because of the Kethany expectations." Jake reached out and took her hand. It started as protection, but it became real somewhere along the way. Maybe it was real from the beginning and we just didn't recognize it. Lisa squeezed his hand. "The Kethany have a saying? Sci-fi taught it to me last week. In their language, it translates to the heart knows what the mind has not yet learned. That sounds about right." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the city below come alive with evening activity. Jake could see Kethany and human figures moving together through the lighted spaces. "There's something else," Lisa said. "Sci-fi wants to perform a formal bonding ceremony for us. She says we've already proven the bond is real, but the ceremony would make it official in Kethany law. What would that mean for us? We'd be considered full citizens of the clan. We could own property here, participate in clan decisions, even adopt Kethany children if we wanted to." Jake considered this. "What about human law?" Lisa smiled mischievously. "Well, Earth's diplomatic regulations say that ambassadors and researchers can marry according to local customs when establishing permanent settlements on new worlds. So we'd be legally married by both human and Kethany standards." "You've really thought this through." "I've had 6 months to think about it. Sci-fi has been dropping hints about the ceremony for weeks. I think she's been planning this longer than either of us realized." Jake turned to face Lisa fully. "Then I guess there's only one question left." "What's that?" "Will you marry me, Dr. Carter, according to both human and Kethany traditions?" Lisa's smile lit up her entire face. "Yes, Sergeant Morrison. I thought you'd never ask." Jake pulled her close and kissed her as the last light faded from the twin suns. Below them, the Kethany city glowed with warm light, a symbol of the new world they were building together. Year later, Jake and Lisa stood in the same spot, but this time, they weren't alone. Ambassador Ruth Davis, from Earth's diplomatic corps, was visiting for the quarterly review, along with Sci-fi and several other Kethany leaders. "The joint research program has exceeded all expectations," Ambassador Davis was saying. "The biotechnology applications alone will revolutionize agriculture on 6 different human colonies. And the cultural exchange program has been equally successful," Sci-fi added. 20 of our young ones are now studying at human universities, while 15 human students are living with Kethany families. Jake watched Lisa demonstrate the latest crop modifications to the visiting officials. She moved with confidence and authority, equally comfortable explaining complex science to humans or discussing growing cycles with Kethany farmers. "She's remarkable," Ambassador Davis commented. "Both of you are. This partnership has become the model for peaceful first contact protocols throughout human space." Jake nodded, but his attention was focused on Lisa. 6 months of marriage had only strengthened their bond. They worked together seamlessly. Whether they were solving technical problems or hosting diplomatic dinners, Lisa finished her demonstration and rejoined the group. She slipped her hand into Jake's without thinking about it, a gesture so natural that neither of them noticed it anymore. "The next phase of expansion is ready to begin," she reported. "We can start construction on the 2nd research facility next month." As the group continued their tours, Jake reflected on how much had changed since that cold night when they had shared a tent to survive. What had started as a desperate attempt to stay alive had become the foundation for something much larger. The Kethany had been right from the beginning. They had shared more than just warmth in that tent. They had shared their futures, and in doing so had created a bridge between 2 very different worlds.